back, guys. Another podcast, another episode that we're currently recording. So, in today's episode, we're going to discuss the topic of perception. I think it's pretty important. We'll break down what perception is, but I mean, how you're perceived by people is really important because it actually can influence you to the point of feeling like there's something wrong with you, which we'll talk about. And I've come to the realization that you can be perceived in so many different ways. And so trying to figure out that journey internally and externally is really important. But before we get into it, let's break down what perception is. So, Arthur, what are your thoughts on perception?
Well, when I think of perception, I think about like how everybody interprets things, and it's really influenced by like your upbringing and all that. And we're talking about the how it's broken down into like beliefs, knowledge, and experiences. And I see when I think of interpretation, there's how us as individuals interpret things, but also how other people look upon us and their external interpretations. I like to think of that as like an internal interpretation, but also external.
Oh, no, that's awesome. And I think for me, anyway, when we talk about perception, this is something I have to keep reminding myself of, and we'll go into a lot more detail. But as you mentioned, like there's the internal perception, how you perceive yourself, and that's really the only thing you can control. And then there's the external perception, how others perceive you. And I've learned along my journey that you're very limited to how you can control how other people perceive you. You could be one of the best people in the world. You can donate to charity. You can do all this amazing stuff, and there'll still be people out there who perceive you in a way that's not true to your own self. And I find that contrast really interesting because, you begin to kind of question, well, how do you fix that external perception? Is there a way to even fix it? Is there a way to get people to perceive you in the way that you want? And the more I think about it, the more I come to the conclusion that there is no fix to it. There is no solution, right? If anything, you just have to double down and work on your internal self and the way that you perceive yourself and your relationship with your inner being, right? And that kind of ties into self-acceptance. I think look, at the end of the day, everyone's always going to struggle with the idea of perception and how other people perceive them. But I think those who go on to work on themselves and accept themselves for their authentic, for their authentic energy and their authentic self, they kind of balance it out. It's easier to balance out. They put more weight to, what am I trying to say? Do you get what I'm trying to say? Like they balance out the idea that not everyone's going to accept them.
Yeah, and
Does that make sense?
it's kind of that acceptance of like you are who you are, and like as you said, you're like being comfortable with your inner being, and that like authenticity is like I think that is important. But I guess a question I have for you is like, is there any like ways you have or like approaches to manipulating your perception? I mean, as you said, there isn't so much you can do. A lot of it's out of control, but just from the way you speak or the way you hold yourself with your posture, like those little things can make a huge difference.
For sure. That's a really good question. And there are absolutely things that you can do to manipulate how people perceive you. So for example, I mean, first impression is everything. You know, if you walk into a room dressed like a homeless person, and no offense to homeless people, I'm just saying, people are going to perceive you in a certain way immediately, even if you had $1 million in the bank account, right? Like you could have $1 million in the bank account, but if you go to Coles dressed like a homeless person, you have the first impression is, well, this guy has no money, even though I might have a lot of money. Okay, so vice versa. I mean, if you go out and you're all suited up, you could have $0 to your name, and people would think that you have something going for you, right? So use that to your advantage. I mean, you can absolutely manipulate by how you dress. Okay, that's definitely one thing, and I know a lot of people I mean, there are mixed feelings about this because people like just dress how you want, be comfortable. And I agree to that to an extent, but also you can't bullcrap it. Like, first impression is everything. You know what I mean? And if you know that, then why not take advantage of the fact that how someone sees you for the first time is going to matter? And that ties into how you present yourself. So, like, is your hair done? What kind of clothing are you wearing? And it doesn't have to be expensive, but even a $10 t-shirt from Kmart can look good on you if it's fitted right and if you work out and all that kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So yeah, clothing. A big thing for me, which I don't think a lot of people put enough emphasis on, is actually how I carry myself in public. I'm like super self-aware. And what I mean by that is like I make sure that I know what's happening in my surroundings. I'm always holding the door for people. I'm always, if I drop a bit of rubbish, I'm sure to pick it up. If I eat and I never leave a table with rubbish on it after I eat. I mean, when we went out, I'm not sure if you remember, but when we went out to eat, how courteous were we?
Yeah, a lot, a lot.
Did you notice anything in particular, or was it just like another day?
I think it's like it all comes down to your like awareness of what's actually happening around you, and if you shut it all off, you won't notice it, and there's a whole world of interpretation you wouldn't even realize. So it comes down to like just your awareness and everything.
Oh yeah, for sure. But even like, so back to our saying, like when we went out, every time I go out, I've got to make sure that I'm treating the waitress with respect, the tables and the chairs to the best of my ability. Like, I'm not gonna go psycho mode, but I'm gonna try and make sure everything is how it was before we got there, before we ate. Try and clean up the plates as much as I can. So that stuff's really important when it comes to how people perceive you. You know what I mean? That's something that you can manipulate in a positive way. Another thing is how you articulate yourself, and we kind of touched on this yesterday, but if you on the back end put a lot of effort into ensuring that you have really good communication skills, that's a big thing too. If I go out and I meet someone for the first time and I'm mumbling my words and every second word is automatically, whether I like it or not, people are going to assume that I'm not as educated. That's just how it is. You know what I mean?
Mm.
Even though I'm a law student, even though I finished a law degree. So how you communicate is really important too. If I go out and I can use my words and every day I learn a new word and I can integrate that into my vocabulary and I'm not saying every second word and I've got eye contact, all that stuff contributes to how you're perceived. You know what I mean?
Yeah, for sure. And I want to touch back real quick about how you carry
Yeah.
yourself. There was something I kind of made it a habit. It was whenever you walk through a door, you have to like restructure your posture, and you find yourself if you just see that door, you walk through it, and it's like, hang on, my shoulders aren't back, or like, and I think it's like it makes such a big difference when you're like walking into a room, or even for me, like a classroom. You walk into that classroom, and it'd be like it lifts your own like emotions. It makes you feel more powerful. So it has a huge a huge effect. And there was also a study that says a power pose, like a power pose or like a Superman pose before
Mhm.
a musical performance. I think it was increases your likelihood of like doing a performance that you're proud of by 30% by just doing that for 2 minutes before your performance. So it has extremely powerful effects.
For sure. I used to do this thing and I read it from a book and it was a book on manifestation. But it's still relevant because it talks about how you go into any new scenario and they call it segment intending, where it's like a new scenario. So, for example, I'm driving to the shopping center, that's scenario one. I go into a cafe, that's scenario two. Like, you're always, if you break your day down in different scenarios where you're going from event to event to event, and in before every event, you begin to mentally prepare and intend how you want that event to go, if that makes sense. So that kind of ties into what you're saying, because if you're hyper aware of how your posture is before you enter into a room, that's going to impact your confidence. It's going to impact a lot more. There was another book that I read, and you should read this one if you've got time, Arthur. It's called Cues. And it's this lady who did a lot of research into human behavior, but also how we communicate with our eyes, our eyebrows, our hands, and it like I don't want to go into it too much, but even stuff like this, like when I've got my hands out like this, it means I'm open. If I've got my hands like this, it means I'm protecting myself. It's like I don't want you to get too close to me because I'm protecting like my heart with my arms like this. Whereas if I'm open like this and my feet are kind of wide, that's a confidence type of posture, where it's like I'm open for you to come and communicate with me. I don't want to go into it too much because we could be here all day, but it's really interesting. And those little things, without you knowing, right? You doing this, you're perceived as aggressive. You're perceived as, I don't want to talk to this guy. He looks angry, right? And so it's little things like that where if you can start changing your body language, that's going to also allow people to perceive you in ways that you want, and you manipulate that as well. Does that make sense? Because if you manipulate your body language subconsciously, we're talking at a subconscious level, people are going to perceive you in different ways.
I really like that, how you can control it, but also you can use it the other way. You can use it to say, hang on, the person I'm talking to right now isn't actually that comfortable or is really open and this is a really good conversation. So it's so much, it's a huge part of communication. And
Right,
it's really,
absolutely.
of course.
No, you go, keep going.
It's yeah, I just enjoy watching people because as soon as you're aware of it, as soon as it's in here, you just notice every little micro expression.
Me too. And you're so right. That's exactly what the book talks about. He
Mm.
doesn't just talk about how you can have other people perceive you. It talks about, well, if you know these cues, if you know body language, then when someone you're talking to is uncomfortable, you're going to be able to tell. You're going to be able to understand. When someone you're talking to takes a step back instead of leaning forward, well, you know that they're not comfortable with the conversation. And it's really interesting because I haven't mastered body language, but when you begin to master body language, you can go a long way in terms of how you interact with people. There was something else that you said. Like, what was the last thing that you said?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, this always happens. But anyway,
Yeah.
um, no, that's right. But yeah, so body language is a big thing, and obviously you can control to an extent of how people perceive you. I guess, I mean, a question to you, because I mean, we did touch on like the difference between internal and external. And we gave some examples of how you can manipulate the external to an extent. It's very limited how you can manipulate it, but to a certain extent you can. Talk to me about how you can manipulate the internal, because that's actually more superior. So, what are things that you can do to work on yourself internally so that you perceive yourself in a really, really positive way?
I think, look, I think the first thing is becoming aware, and that's like you can't. Do you listen to a podcast, The Mindset Mentor? Have you came across them?
I haven't, no.
I haven't. You should listen to them. But they always stress the importance of being able to notice you're doing something. But with the personal interpretation, I think that's the first step. Realizing what you're doing in each situation. Um, it's also like the the power that like family and your upbringing have um on your identity is huge, and I don't think people realize that enough. Like the effect that has on kids. Like if you're, I'm not sure about the specific statistics, but it's like if your family is like abusive or you have abusive parents, that'll shape your identity hugely, hugely.
Yep.
But for you to for you, individuals to perceive things differently, I think once again it just starts with being able to open your eyes be aware of what's happening.
Yeah, you're 100% right. I mean, self-awareness is the key because it's the first step. I mean, if you're not self-aware that you're a dickhead, well, you're gonna go about your life and you're gonna wait for a terrible interaction for someone to make that known to you. I actually I think it's kind of toxic. And I'm still trying to figure this out, but I'm self-aware to the point where could be unhealthy as to how self-aware I am because I mean not really. I think it's good, but when you begin to overthink things, right? Like if I'm going out in public and everything I'm doing I'm being self-aware about, it can begin to consume you. So I've got to be very careful that I don't let it consume me to the point where it gives me anxiety. And I'm not there. I don't get anxiety from critiquing myself and being self-aware, but I genuinely, for me, that's the biggest thing because otherwise you're lying to yourself. I mean, there's no point if you're going about life and you you know you're not aware of areas that you can be better in. That's big. How are you going to change? You know what I mean?
Mm. I think that's really interesting that like you've noticed you can be too self-aware. And I think just from 2 days ago, our first podcast, I came out of there. Hang on. I was like, I've thought so much about how I'm speaking, how I'm delivering what I'm saying, but there's almost when you're thinking that much, there's also almost like you've drawn back your authenticity a little bit. And I was like, that's a priority I want to have on the podcast, being authentic.
Dude, that's big. I've actually never thought of it like that. You
Mm.
learn something new every day, even from people who are younger than you, man. I really like that a lot. That's yeah. So, and I think that back to what I was saying, I've got to make sure that I don't allow it to take away from me being my authentic self and just being true to myself. You're absolutely right. And I think that's actually the indicator that hey, you're doing too much. As soon as you stop being your true self, there's something that's wrong. There's something that's going on.
But
You're
then I
right.
have
I
a
mean, I want to go, go,
so
go.
then I have
Yeah.
a question like where do you think you draw the line? Because to get better, you're gonna have to change. It might not be you yet, but for it to become you, you have to do it, right? That's kind of like manifestation. So where do you draw the line of being, hang on, this isn't authentic enough, but also this is the person I want to become. Should I be doing it in this situation?
It's a really good question, and I'm going to answer it like this: being authentic, okay, is actually has more of an energy. It's a higher frequency of energy than love, and love. People think that love is the highest frequency. Being authentic is now. I believe that if you're authentic to yourself, that energy that you put out there will attract what you need to become better. Whether that's better people, better opportunities, whatever it is, right? So it's interesting because, like, where do you draw the line? Well, I think that if you're authentic to your true self, because if you think about it, your true self is everything I mean, it's kind of weird because everything that you've worked towards, and it's everything that it's also the gap between who you are now and your potential. So it's like both of those. You know what I mean? Does that make
Mm,
sense? It's like
I
your
think
true
so.
self
Yeah.
is everything that you've built so far. So, for example, I mean, me hitting the gym every day, I know that I'm a guy of integrity and I'm going to do what I said and I'm going to go work out. That's something that is true to myself. Like, I know it's part of my identity. So, it's things that I've done that have formed part of my identity so far. And then the second part of that is the person that I'm not yet. I haven't become this person yet, but it's the gap between, well, who I am currently and my potential, who I want to be. And that comes into the visualization. Like, I know the type of guy that I want to be. I know the qualities that I want. So I write it down and I always strive to be that. And if I'm being authentic, if I'm being true to myself, I'll keep being given opportunities to meet that criteria. Does that make sense?
I really like that. I really like
Well,
that.
not really. Doesn't make sense.
No, no, no. I see what you're saying. Definitely.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've never thought about it like that, but I believe that if you are true to yourself, you'll continue to attract opportunities and people who will, number one, reinforce that to you, but then number two, they'll give you the opportunity to close the gap between who
Mm.
you currently are and your potential, your true potential. And that's that gap that you want to close, because you eventually want to keep changing. I mean, for me, I want to be a different person every 6 months. I think 6 months is okay. Maybe 3 months if we want to go extreme. But I mean, every 6 months, I want to be able to reintroduce myself to people and say, "Hey, my name's Nate. This is what I do," and it's completely different to who I was 6 months ago. Whether that's because my body has changed or the way that I communicate has changed, or any of that. Did you just see that, bro?
Yeah, the thumbs up.
Dude,
That
I
was.
didn't even know you could do that. Hold on, hold on. I think if you put your thumb up, it just, I don't know. Anyway, keep going. What were you going to say?
I like how you've set it to a time bound, and I think that might be the point where it becomes non-authentic. Is if you're saying, "Hang on, it's going to happen now." But I like how you said 6 months. It might take months. It might take years. It depends what it is. But that idea that it will take time and it can't happen instantly. And I think that's over that time where you're working on it every day, but you're not going to reach the destination in a day.
Exactly, for sure. Back to what we're talking about, internal perception, like other things you can do. I'm a big believer in my character and traits. I always try to be better in terms of virtues. Okay, so for example, like patience, integrity, honesty, etc. I put a lot of emphasis on those things, right? I mean, in terms of your internal self, there are other things that you can work on. I think everyone should always work on traits like that. How do you become more patient? How do you become a person with more integrity? And that kind of ties into then other attributes like, do you hit the gym? When you say you're going to do something, do you do it? Do you have good habits? Right? Like we were talking about cold showers and cold plunges the other day. It's like, and I'm not saying everybody's going to do that, but what are your habits? Do you have good habits that are actually allowing you to experience dopamine, natural dopamine, rather than just sitting there and scrolling Instagram and trying to receive instant dopamine from there? So I think habit building goes a long way when it comes to your internal perception.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
I guess, yeah, definitely. If you found something new you wanted to do, I guess I want to know, like, how would you approach creating it, turning it into a habit? Saying, "Oh, I want to do this at this time every day or once a day." What's your approach to making it a habit, making it habitual?
It's a really good question. Have you read Atomic Habits?
I'm reading it at the moment.
I'm sure that book is going to give you a better answer than what I'm going to give you. I haven't fully read that book. I'm not going to lie. I've read parts of the book. So if I say something, correct me, because I've only read parts of the book. But in my head, the first thing is the decision. There's no point taking action if you haven't 100% justified that decision of having a new habit. So, for example, when I decided to stop eating chocolate a number of years ago, I could say it and I could try it, but until I got to the point where there was like this emotional pull to want to stop eating chocolate, like my why was really big, like I was getting really fat. It didn't mean anything. I could take all the action in the world. It's not going to mean anything until I can sit and look myself in the mirror and actually be like, no, I've got to do this. I have to do this because I'm going to be a better person if I do this. So that's the first thing. Like you've got to make that honest decision, and you've got to be able to justify to your body and your mind why stopping chocolate is going to be better for you long term, or why that habit is going to be better for you long term. All right. Then, I mean, how I did it with chocolate is you've got to start small. It's about the 1% every day, because if you go from 0 to 100, you're going to go up and then you're going to crash just as fast. And so you need to slowly integrate the habit into your life. So for example, I know maybe Atomic Habit talks about if you're trying to get into the gym, maybe just start slow, like just in the morning, just tell yourself that you're going to put your shoes on in the morning first, your gym shoes. And if you walk out the door and you go back inside, well, at least you're 1% better. Does that make sense, that part?
Yeah, of course. I think something also Atomic Habits really stresses is that while making a habit, it has to start within your identity. So a lot of people make a habit because they want something, but you got to do it the other way around. I think it had a diagram and it was like most people start here with wants, beliefs, and then identity. But to
Yeah,
create a long lasting habit, you've got to start with your identity. So in the chocolate case, maybe you manifest yourself and you tell yourself, I'm not a person that eats chocolate. And you can repeat that and you identify someone that doesn't eat chocolate. And that's a way to create a much stronger and long lasting habit.
for sure. And I think that's why I touched on, see, the book describes it in that way. I think that's why I touched on the first thing is making that decision. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not about just doing the habit. It's like you've got to make that decision. You have to have a why, and that ties into your identity as well. Because when I was standing there making the decision to not have chocolate anymore, well, that's I'm doing it for a reason, but it is because I want to change my identity. Like I don't want to be a fat bastard anymore. I don't want to be unhealthy. I want to take care of myself. And it's like that identity part. You're right. A third step as well, and I know the book talks about this, is habit stacking. So something that I did when I was getting into gym was I found something that gave me that I enjoyed. So for example, my pre-workout, I really enjoy the taste of pre-workout. Okay, and I kind of got hooked onto getting up at 5 in the morning and making my pre-workout and tasting that pre-workout. I was excited for that more than I was for the gym. You know what I mean? Especially when you got like a new flavor. Like I just got so hooked onto it. And the same with my protein. Like I got really excited to taste my protein after a gym session. So stacking that where I'm getting up for my pre-workout, associating that with then, well, if I have my pre-workout, then I have to go to gym. And that kind of made it a bit easier to get up, especially when I was doing morning sessions. I'm sure the book talks about other things. What are you learning from the book at the moment? Is anything standing out?
Something you just touched on is um, making the habit fun, like making it
Mm,
enjoyable, because that's huge. Like you were just describing, you look forward to it, you're excited to do it, and that makes it so much easier to execute it for sure.
yeah, absolutely. I guess back to the topic in terms of perception, right? I mean, we've touched on things that can help with internal perception. We've touched on things that can help manipulate external perception. What are your thoughts on someone who struggles with? Because I know a lot of people do. A lot of people struggle with how they're perceived, and that's why we have like crazy rates of anxiety because it's well, people think that people are think some way of them, right? So, I mean, what are your thoughts on overcoming that? How do you overcome the idea that people are going to perceive you in a way that's out of your control?
It's a really good question. I think it's hard for me to answer right now, but what came to mind is becoming really, really comfortable with who you are and like proud of who you are. And then I don't think it would be so much of an issue if you're like comfortable and like, this is who I am. You'll be more proud of what you become. And if you can just get on that journey of like, I'm getting better every day and it's a journey and it's where I am and where I am now, it will be better tomorrow or better in a month or better in a year. That that like self-confidence, I think, is what like separates people from being worried about what people think about them.
Yeah, nice. I like that. Two things came to mind for me. Um, the first is the power of detachment, and so what I mean by that is I actually do something that's very dangerous in a good way. It's just dangerous for people around me. It is what it is mentality. It is what it is. My girl leaves me. It is what it is. My crush rejects me. It is what it is. Some loser says something to me on the street. It is what it is. I miss my boss. It is what it is. So that it is what it is mentality, which ties into letting go and just being detached, that is so powerful. It's really powerful to the point where it can piss a lot of people off because I play a game with myself. I mean, I'll do stuff and I'll just go, well, I didn't feel good about that rejection. But number one, it's going to build my character. I now know that I'm confident enough to approach someone and let them know how I feel about them. But it is what it is. Like, it's out of my control. It is what it is. So I think that helps. And that takes a lot of work, though. It doesn't happen overnight. But when you can start to play into that mentality, you're going to go a long way in terms of, I mean, you're not going to care about what people think about you. Because your behavior, if you embarrass yourself in public or if you keep in mind, like this is all with the foundation that we're being polite. Like I'm not saying go and assault someone and then be like, it is what it is. Like if you're going about your day and you're a good person, you're being polite, etc. How people react to you, it's out of your control and it is what it is, right? The other part to that, or the second part is, what was it? I think just the idea, and it ties to it is what it is, but the idea of like, you've got to accept yourself for who you are, and you're never going to be able to control what people think. So why waste mental energy trying to control other people when you can take that energy and effort and double down into bettering yourself?
I think as we started the podcast, we explained and they explored the idea of there is a lack of control of what people of people's interpretation of you. And I think what you've just said is how I interpret that is being comfortable without control. Like being comfortable being like, hang on, there's nothing I can do. I just got to move on and not getting too caught up with the problem or whatever it is that is worrying you.
For sure. I agree. And like, once again, it ties into, I mean, if I could kind of give a piece of advice for someone who struggles with it, like just try the it is what it is game. Like just play it as a game. If anything happens and it's like negative, just literally in your head be like, it is what it is. Everything's working out for me. It's fine. And just laugh about it. Just laugh about it. You know, I think humor is, and it's something that I'm glad that my father passed it down to me, because my dad's like really, he likes to be a comedian. And I mean, it's important to not take everything as a joke, but I think laughing at yourself is really powerful. When you stuff up and you can laugh at yourself, there's something really, really cool about that.
Sure.
You want to add anything else, man?
Something popped into my head, but it just left me.
Dude, I feel that so bad.
Yeah,
I feel that. Oh, question. I got a question.
for sure.
With this podcast, right? There is a vision that it gets out to thousands and thousands and thousands of people. Now, I know for a fact that when it does get out to thousands and thousands of people, there potentially could be hate along the way, right? And I'll talk about my opinion on hate in a second, because if anything, when I go on Instagram and I go through some reels, and there's just people, like they're just people trying to make it, and there's all these hate comments, it actually helps push them into the algorithm, which is funny. It actually helps them, right?
Yeah.
But I mean, like, what are your thoughts on when you put yourself out there? You've got to be ready to receive some sort of hate. What are your thoughts on that?
First of all, I've like kind of learned how to overcome that. Like hate, I believe, is a sign of insecurity in the other person. Like the
Mm-hmm.
person spreading hate, I think it's a saying, the person that hates is never doing better than you. And like, I don't know, I struggle to understand why people go out of their way to try and pull people down. I guess pull them down to their level. But I think it's insecurity for sure, and that's where it comes from. But especially like with the podcast and when it grows, I mean, it's just as long as there's that one person that's like, this has helped me, this has touched me in a spot. That's what we're doing it for.
Dude, I have to show you a clip I did like 2 years ago. I said the exact same thing. So it's good that we're
Really.
on the same wavelength, man. That's the main thing. Because I said this ages ago. I said, look, uh, this could be cringe. People could see it as useless. People could see it as blah 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 blah. But if it's helping one person, and on my a lot of my older videos, which are not public anymore on my YouTube, um, there were a lot of comments from randoms all over the world. Like I had someone from India reach out to me, and there were these comments that were saying like this really helped. Like I actually, what you said really helped change something in how I thought about myself or how I think about things, you know. And then that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. You're right. So I agree.
I think I think especially like people, it's much less common for someone to reach out and say, "I really love what you're doing." But I feel like more people are comfortable saying, "Hang on, this sucks," or spreading hate. So it can be hard mentally if you're getting more hate comments than like your work is really good and it's affecting me this way and touching me in this way. But yeah, it's something you just have to overcome, I guess.
Yeah, true. It's interesting because I always think about how am I going to respond when it happens. It's going to happen. It's going to happen because no doubt, I want to be able to impact thousands of people, and with that power, you know, I know I'm going to bear the responsibility of having to deal with haters. Like it is what it is. There's no good without bad, and I always think I'm like I always think that I'll be able to deal with it, but I guess you never know until you're in that moment. And I think, sorry, man, I'm still sick, so my voice is still a bit weird. But
Oh, you good?
the the other thing as well, it's like, well, who's around you in your inner circle? That's really important because if you've got the right people around you, um, maybe they help you get through it. You know, like
Yeah,
if we're both like convicted in our vision, maybe we just like once again, it is what it is, and we just kind of power through. It's like, but I'm curious to see how I respond to it when it actually happens.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah, and
good
just being
question.
able to throw yourself there and say, "Hang on," I think it's a good issue to have, and a lot of people would would work very hard to have the same issue.
True. It's very
Mm.
true. It's kind of how I think about celebrities. Like they're out there making millions and millions and millions of dollars, but then you have the paparazzi who just like abuse them all the time. And I always think, like, I always feel quite empathetic towards them. I'm like, that would suck having someone just follow your every move and write all this stuff about you. But then again, like, would I have that life if I knew that I'd have paparazzi showing up at my door all the time? Would I do that for the lifestyle that they have in terms of like financial freedom, you know, all the money that they can wish for? You know what I mean? I don't have an answer yet because
Mm.
once again, there's good and bad to both. But you're absolutely right. I mean, something's got to give. You know what I mean? Like if I'm asking for a platform, if we're asking for a platform that's massive, well, something's got to give.
Mm.
Something else is going to come and be a challenge. You know?
I think celebrities are so polarized as well as like in media. People forget that they're actually just we're all the same. We're all human, and they're like
Mm,
very treated very differently. But
yeah,
but like
true.
but like you just said, it would suck to have paparazzi everywhere. Just trying to get into your car on the street. People don't actually step back and think, hang on, that's a human that's being surrounded, and it can be very difficult for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Interesting. Is there anything else? I'm still trying to think about what the second part to. This was ages ago. We've passed it now, but
Yeah, yeah.
like it is what it is mentality. And there was something else I wanted to touch on. It I've lost it. Of like how to deal with perception, like how people perceive you. Um, is there anything else you want to add on to? Like maybe any personal experiences, anything that you've gone through, or
Yeah, I don't know. Nothing. I don't think nothing's coming to mind. But definitely just
have
moving on.
yeah, have you ever tried rejection therapy?
I've thought about it.
Me
Definitely.
too, me too.
Yeah.
I've seen one of my mates. He lives up in Brisbane, and he was posting this series about rejection therapy and how every day he made it a goal to get rejected. He's an awesome guy, and he would post about his rejection. So whether it was like asking a girl out, or asking the police for a selfie, or asking for a discount at McDonald's, whatever it was, he'd do it with the intention of getting rejected. And if he didn't get rejected, it was just like a bonus. Like if he went and asked for a discount, you do that with the intention of them saying no. But if they say yes, well, you you just got a discount on a coffee or whatever, right? And I was
Mm.
watching that. I'm like, I really want to start doing that. I think it'd be a great thing, and it would definitely help in terms of not giving a damn about how people perceive you, because you really have to be like next level to be able to go and just approach someone and you know ask her out or whatever. Like I've kind of been doing that recently, where I'm trying to step a bit out of my comfort zone, and it's tough because it's if you don't get the response that you want, it can be tough. Like it can hurt the ego. But then again, it gives you a chance to build character and build confidence.
I think what comes to mind is if you're forcing yourself to become comfortable with the rejection, it's almost like lowering your expectation. And that means like when you do win, when you do get that discount on that coffee, it's more rewarding.
For sure.
But yeah, what do you
Yeah,
think about that?
I agree with that. I think that to add on top of that, it normalizes rejection. It normalizes to the point where it's you. What do you think holds people back from living an amazing life? It's the fear of rejection. It's the fear of, well, like we said, what people think about you, but that ties into rejection to some extent. Like you don't want to go and take risk because number one, you're worried that you're going to fail, but number two, you're worried that you're going to get rejected or you're going to fail. Oh, I already said fail, but how people view you, right? That's a big part of it. So if you can normalize rejection, where rejection is no longer a big thing. For example, if I've never asked a girl out or I've never complimented a girl in public and I go do it and I get rejected, that's going to feel like a massive thing. That's going to feel like it's the end of the world. I'm going to be like, oh crap, I just got rejected by this pretty girl and I'm a loser, I suck, I'm ugly, I'm this, I'm that. You know what I mean? Like you start to kind of spiral in this negative thought and it impacts you internally. Whereas if you normalize that idea of rejection, keep in mind, once again, be respectful. I'm not saying go and do something crazy, right?
Mm.
If you're being respectful and you just go compliment a girl and you're doing it, it doesn't even have to be a girl, like a dude. Like I'll compliment guys in the gym. Like your muscles are massive, man. Like what's your gym? What's your workout? Because I want to be like that, right? But if I go do it on a day to day basis and I'm normalizing rejection along the way, well, when it does happen, when I do get rejected, it's like, well, well, okay, next. You know what I mean? Like
Just
it's
moving
it's
on.
not really, yeah, just moving on.
That idea of they say you need a failure, you need to fail to succeed, right? To learn, you need to fail.
Hmm.
Rejection to me is kind of that failure, kind of that learning process.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is absolutely. It's you fell forward and you fell forward. Like here's the thing, right? If you well, back to what I was going to say actually. Like the second part to that was once you get to the point where you've normalized rejection and you've normalized failure, then you can live life to your full potential because nothing's holding you back. Like if I want to go eat, if I right now decided I wanted a steak at a five-star restaurant, I'm gonna go. Even if I'm going by myself, because a lot of people wouldn't go by themselves to like a really classy restaurant because they're like, well, what are people going to think? Like I'm there by myself. nothing stops me. I'm going to go enjoy myself. If I want to go watch a movie that's come out, I'm going to go. I'm not going to wait on somebody. And so when you're in that mindset of like, I don't care what people think, I don't care about rejection and it's normalized, well, you can then go live your full potential. You can then go do things unconditionally without having to rely on someone else. You know what I mean? What were you saying? Because I wanted to say something about that. Oh yeah, failing
The
forward.
failure.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Just the
yeah. So
idea that rejection is kind of the failure of, or they say you need to fail to succeed. Rejection is kind of that side of failure.
yeah, for sure, it absolutely is. I mean, if you think about it, right? If you go about life and you don't fail at anything, you're kind of just like going in a straight line. There's no resistance. There's nothing. You need resistance to be able to go like that. Like if you're just like constant and you're not failing at anything, and I mean, if you're not, look, it's kind of like yin and yang, right? If you don't fail at anything, you're not going to succeed at anything. You're just going to be an average Joe. So I think you're right. You need to be able to fail. You need to get rejected because that's going to help build the character you need to be able to succeed one day.
Mm, for sure. And I
That's
like
where
that
you
people think failure is going down backwards, but it's really not. You've got to rewire your brain that it's actually improvement.
exactly, yeah, 100%. No, it's good. What any other thoughts, man, or should we wrap it up?
I'm drained back. That's
You're
me.
right. I know, mate. They podcasting is something different, hey? Something different.
Takes a lot of focus for sure.
Takes some, yeah, I know.
Mm.
All right, man. Let's we'll wrap it up there. We'll stay tuned for the next podcast. Guys, by the way, I don't say this ever. I don't think I ever say subscribe. I don't even think people are going to be on till like the 48th minute. But if you can, I've seen the analytics. A lot of people are kind of watching and they're not actually subbed to the channel. So, I mean, the goal, we're still going to sit down and talk about goal setting and where I want the podcast to go. But I really want to hit over 500 subs as soon as possible. And I think we're at about like 370, so nearly there. But yeah, if you can hit the sub button, and yeah, stay tuned for the next podcast.